2, 1. I got with me today Stephen Chish, about to be Dr. Stephen Chish of a nuclear engineering degree in detection at OSU. But today, actually, we're going to talk a little bit about the education system as a whole and just kind of see where it goes from there.
All right.
Yeah, so I guess you're about to get your PhD.
Yeah, I am. And, well, before I start, I want to thank you for having me on here.
Yeah.
Glad to talk about my stuff. So, yes, I am at the end of pursuing my PhD, I'm going to be finishing up by December. It is the end of July. So I got about 4 or 5 months left.
Yeah, and how actually was getting a PhD different than your preconceptions of it before you went in?
Well, it's hard for me to think about my personal preconceived perceptions of it. I don't know if I really had any. I just
I mean, I'm sure you're I'll be more well respected if I have a PhD. You see people like Dr. blank blank blank, and you think of them okay, that person, I trust what that person says more than someone who doesn't have that.
I think I see what you're saying. I thought you were asking the actual experience, the day-to-day, what was my preconceived notion of what it was going to be like, because I have an answer to that too, at least for other people. But for me, as far as getting the PhD and getting the Dr. dot in front of my name, being able to check that box when they ask Mr., Mrs., Doctor, check the doctor. I'm not there yet, so I can't 100% say, it was life-changing. But from my experience as a whole, it doesn't really make that much of a difference on the day-to-day. Really, it never comes from the title so much as the actual experience you hold. And when talking to the general public, especially for doing something as contentious as nuclear, by and large, people are going to either write you off or listen to what you have to say, regardless of if you have a PhD or a master's or a bachelor's or whatever. If you've pursued nuclear engineering, I found that people are probably going to already know what they're going to think of you or what they're going to say to you. But in the field, it doesn't matter that I don't have a PhD yet. It doesn't matter that if I do have a PhD. What matters is the fact that I know what I know due to my time in school and due to pursuing this.
If someone just invested a bunch of time into nuclear engineering, but they didn't go to school for it, what would you think of them as someone in the field? You, say you're in a position of hiring someone. Mm-hmm. Would you look at someone with a PhD versus someone who knew the exact same thing without a PhD? Would you look at them differently?
I can't see how they would possibly know the same things with a PhD and without a PhD. And the reason why, and this goes back to preconceived notions and what people might think about the experience of grad school versus not, is so the other day, I'm gonna break in an anecdote here. The other day, I guess my girlfriend was riding up to Salem, Oregon, to see some family, and her grandma was in the car, and I was brought up, and Tori, my girlfriend, was saying oh yes, sometimes Steve will run into issues while he's working, and it will be outside of his knowledge pool as of now, and he'll have to ask his advisor to weigh in. And my advisor knows a lot more about electronics than I do. I pursue nuclear engineering, but my job also has a lot of electronics. My advisor is much more professional in the electronic side of things. Mm-hmm. So it's a side that, there's a whole PhD in that right there that I'm not pursuing, but he knows. And so she mentioned, okay, he's having some issues with that. And her grandma was like, he's almost done with school. Shouldn't he be able to do anything? And it's that's not exactly how that works. Yeah. One, the field that I'm pursuing is very wide. And so when you do a PhD, you're pursuing one thing extremely intently, and you learn a lot of things along the way, but there's always more that you learn. And this is actually a relatively paralyzing thing sometimes, because my advisor has told me hey, you should present on this, and I'm I don't feel comfortable with this. I just am investigating this. I don't really know enough. I haven't read enough statistics textbooks. And he's that's what research is. You present, and then you learn more, and you present, and you learn more, and so on. And so grad school as a whole is an experience of learning on the job and learning with textbooks, and most importantly, in my opinion, you're being surrounded by people who are experts in the field that you are working in. And so like I work in radiation detection, and so my advisor is an expert in radiation detection and electronics. And so if I have issues with these things, or if I'm observing things and it's like, oh, I drew this conclusion from this data, and he can be like, no, that's not correct. It's this. And it's just that. So it's like you have a private mentor who can see everything that you are doing and giving you immediate feedback. It's like I guess having someone who knows as much about nuclear engineering without having a PhD, if they've learned it from books or something like that, or learned it just by screwing around on their own, then it would be like trying to learn a language just by using textbooks and listening to audio and doing the Duolingo app.
Yeah, so you really need a mentor.
Yes, and so like what I'm doing is like basically having some exposure, some immersion exposure, and having a language tutor, like to draw that parallel. And then someone who's just learned all of their stuff in the field, it's like someone who learned the language through complete immersion. And so it's like where I'm at, I have a deeper understanding of like the fundamental, the background, and a lot of things I have learned on the job. I know what they are, I know how they work, but I don't know why they work. And that's where the PhD training, the actual, oh, why does this work? I really have to know for my project. And so I have to go read papers for like 24 hours. And so like I feel like that's a sort of misunderstanding that people have about the PhD and the grad school in general, is they think it's just like a continuation of school. A lot of people, they've just experienced high school, or they've just experienced an associate's or a bachelor's, and they're worlds different from graduate school, which is much more mentorship sort of situation. That was a very, very long-winded answer. I'm pretty sure I answered
but so you don't have
questions.
any interest in keeping in academia and eventually bringing on your own mentees?
Oh, I do. It's right now, I don't, let me think of how to put this. Here. Going back to like, research is always a struggle of like knowing more things. Mm-hmm. I feel like I need to learn more before I can effectively teach to be the best me, to be the best professor. I'm taking in, underlings, I'm training some people, and I can train people in procedures, and I can train people in things in, say, a national lab. But when you're a professor, you're teaching and you're standing on committees, and you're truly a professional in what you do, but also you are finding research and working out how you're going to go about doing that research, and directing other people also to do that research. And there's so much that needs to go into that. And like just watching my advisor do it, it's like the work that we're doing, he's pulling from so many different subfields and subspecialties. And it's like, I don't know if at this moment I have enough to offer to be a good professor, because you also have to understand that like when you're a professor, there's a lot of different politics that goes on with that. So like if you're in a national lab, you get so much different funding compared to like being a professor. You have to write grants. Usually the grants are smaller, and so your projects are much more smaller.
So what's it all about for you? What do you want?
What do I want
with this? What is your progression, and what's the goal with that progression? Like, do you want to further the knowledge of nuclear engineering? Like, if this is going to be really roundabout with like 20 answers that you need to say. So I'm just an average ass person. And I'm like, oh, you do nuclear engineering? What about Chernobyl? And just like I imagine most conversations you come at, people just have an automatic preconception that just progresses it from even getting to a place where you can have a conversation. Like the conversation can't even start because of preconceptions.
Uh-huh.
So do you have any interest in like breaking that down for people, of just like, hey, it's not just about X, Y, and Z?
As far as what drives me, no, that doesn't drive me. But I have a responsibility to do those things to some degree. If the current, I suppose, social and political climate is emotionally and mentally draining and taxing, and sometimes it's very frustrating in the sense of like, how am I going to convince people of anything? People are only going to listen to what they want to listen to. They're only going to hear what they want to hear. And so if someone really, truly is curious, or if someone has no preconceived notions, I can show them a world that they've never really thought about. And that's really nice that I have the ability to do that, but also that I have the obligation to do that. But like in terms of what drives me, I just want to know as much as I can. I want to know as much as I can, and I want to go in and do things. And like the things that I do, it's like solving little physics puzzles all the time. What are these physics doing? And I have to go in there and try to figure out, how is nature behaving, and sort of try to, exploit that to learn more. Try to learn from nature. What is nature trying to show me? And it's not so clear as like, oh, I'm going to tip this glass over and like water's going to spill out. Okay, well, that's very obvious. But like, the things that are going on in a nuclear level, you can definitely infer information, but like the data that you get sometimes is a sea, and you have no idea, what's going on. And so that is very interesting to me.
And so what's your goal with getting that knowledge? You don't want to share it with others. Do you want to like make a new, like, would you say you want to progress the field?
Well, I would definitely not say I don't want to share it with others.
But that's not your calling per se.
I don't, it's not about educating. Like my goal in life isn't so that I learn these things so I can better educate the public. Mm-hmm. I suppose my goals are, I find this field amazingly interesting, and I want to know what else is there. Mm-hmm. And I'm very lucky that the topic that I'm interested in can have positive impacts by, almost by as a byproduct. It's like by learning these things and by discovering these things and by doing these things, it can enrich science, or it can allow people to use this knowledge for other things, for better things, building things, designing things, and so on. And I like to do those things too, but only so far as that design and all that utilizes the things that are very interesting to me, which is really like the fundamental physics exploration. And I mean, I also like, constructing and characterizing things and working with electronics a little bit and that sort of thing.
If you think about how much time and energy you spent into learning just your piece of the puzzle, and if anything, the further you get, you probably just realize, oh shit, I know nothing.
Oh yeah.
Because every single field goes this deep. Do you think that when eventually we can kind of like share and have a hive mind, that it'll help tremendously? Because all that you've learned in that field, like you could never just like bring on a mentor and teach it all to them in like a year. It'd take like years for them to get up to where you are. So if you could just share that with people across the field, and communication wasn't a barrier, like preconceptions and basing your actions off fear and stuff, like
basing your actions off fear.
Like
what do you mean exactly?
Like the job you pick, you want to go into a career that's safe because you're afraid of being homeless. You don't wear something like, I mean, you do, but like a lot of people like wouldn't wear pink because they're afraid of what people might think about them, or like like the majority of the actions I think that people make, like so there's probably two big ones: either avoiding things that you're afraid of, or going toward things that bring you pleasure. And I think it's more right now. We like probably 70 or 80% are on avoiding fear. Like we're in a very like everything you hear on the news is pretty much just things to be afraid of, things to not do, things to avoid.
Well, yes, because would you ever read a book that's about like someone going to the store and like getting the food that they want and then going home and like, enjoying time with their family and then like going on a vacation and everything works well and that's the end of the book? That's not interesting. Yeah. That's not exciting. What's exciting, it's all about the tension and the release, And the tension is what's exciting to people. Mm-hmm. There's always a climax to things. And so like, there is some news where it's like, oh yeah, like this puppy was found and it was like in a sad condition and then like it was cured and everything is happy. And it's like, oh, that's really nice. But like if all the news was like that, it would cease to be impactful. And like sometimes we actually see that in the news itself, where like as it is, where it's like, oh, did you know that such and such political official did some sort of like sexual assault offense? And it's like, oh, must be a Tuesday. Like, isn't that horrible? Isn't that horrible? Like that certain comments can be made by certain people and everyone's outraged for 2 days. And then like, oh, wait, that happened like 2 days ago. Like it's done. It's over.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know if the news is a particularly good representation of how we actually live our lives, because how we actually live our lives is we do seek pleasure and comfort and this and that. And like, I also think it depends on where you're at the time. Because if I, like, having seen situations where people are dead broke, it's like, how much do you have in your savings account? And it's like, what is a savings account? Yeah. They'd have no money. And
I'm totally not right there right
now.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, that's like absolutely terrifying. And so like, in your actions, what are you doing? You're avoiding the fear. You're avoiding.
But further than that, people with decent families and stuff, who don't eat, like maybe you do have interest in nuclear engineering, but someone who doesn't have interest in engineering and stuff, like they're like, oh, I did it because my parents said so. But really, it's because they're afraid of not being something or being seen as well in society or not having enough. Like if you don't like doing math all the time, but you go become an engineer, getting an engineering degree, I imagine it's not like out of like a
I see what you're saying.
Like you make like a lot of your life decisions. Like you don't decide to be afraid of spiders and bees and stuff, but when you see one, you avoid it. And like that's totally rational, but like that spider can't kill you and that bee sting wasn't, like we avoid things that cause us fear. So
are you implying that we're phobic of whatever that is?
Yeah, I think society has instilled false morals of us to be afraid. Like pretty much everything we hear today is just propaganda of things to be afraid of.
I think I agree and I disagree. I think that fear sells. Ask your doctor about this problem that you may or may not have. And it's like, oh, wow, I might have that problem. Mm-hmm. I better go check.
Did you see that? Did you see both of those videos?
Yes, I did.
The one where it's like the main drug is, that's insane.
Ask your doctor. And yeah, it's like fear sells because why would you buy things if you're satisfied? Mm-hmm. You want to buy things because most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you buy things to fix a problem. Mm-hmm. And whether that problem is, I'm sad, I want to be happy, or, I don't like the color of my room, so I'm going to paint it a different one, so I'm going to get paint. And it's easy for people to manufacture problems. It's very hard to sell something like, you're perfectly satisfied with your life, but don't you really want a new cup? And even then, they still have to, don't you not like your old cup?
But even further than that, like there are some things that you can't talk about today because you're afraid of it affecting your future. Yeah. And like if you were to go meet your girlfriend's parents for the first time and say they're like super conservative people and you wore pink, you probably wouldn't wear pink because you'd be afraid of the way that they'd perceive you. So a lot of...
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Just like...
yes.
But then there's totally is like, I want to eat sugar. Like I want pleasure. That's totally a part of it.
Well, in terms of like... Going back to, you said, okay, the engineering, like someone who might not like math goes into engineering because they're afraid of not amounting to something, or they're afraid of this, or they're afraid of that. And I don't know if that's entirely true. So I guess when I took my standardized tests back in high school, I wrote that I wanted to be an English major. And I am chronically displaced in the sense that I like a lot of things all the time. And those things often hop around. And so at the time I was like, oh, I'm going to be an English major. But I've always really liked science.
But did you not go to become an English major because you were scared that it wouldn't pay?
I mean, absolutely, yes. That's part of it.
You based your entire life off a fear-based decision.
No. Okay. Because I also really like physics and engineering. Not so, honestly, I don't really like designing things as much as I like just knowing how they work. And so I really should have gone into physics. And this is where it comes in, your idea, where instead of doing physics, I got accepted to University of Michigan, which is the #1 nuclear engineering school in the country and possibly the world. And so it was like, well, one, I would be foolish to not take this opportunity, but two, engineering, at least at the time, I was under the impression, I still think I believe this, that a bachelor's degree in engineering is probably going to be more lucrative than a bachelor's degree in physics. If you want to go, oh God, yes. But like, I mean, I had already kind of made that decision that I wasn't going to go into English because I knew that English was not
profitable in the current system.
Profitable in the current system, but like.
But at what point is putting what you enjoy spending your time on hold to do something else worth it? Like, are you pursuing this so that eventually one day you can write, or what?
No.
You just gave up writing. It just wasn't.
No, that's not it either. There are very, very few people who are so focused single-mindedly on one thing. And part of me envies those people.
Didn't you just say that that's what a PhD program was?
No. You pursue one thing.
Yeah.
But some people that's their whole life. And I know some people like that, and they are amazingly successful people, like in my field. Like, that's what it takes to become the top of your field, is you need to, wake up in the morning and do nuclear, and then do nuclear while you're eating dinner, read papers, all the time. And I think maybe you take a vacation sometimes. My advisor told me point blank, he looked me in the eye. He's like, I haven't taken a vacation in 11 years. He'll go and see family and whatnot for brief periods. But until last year, he hadn't taken an extended vacation for 11 years. And like, he told me also, he's like, I've been working until 11 o'clock every night for the past 2 months. Like, working for this workshop that I'm giving. And it's like, wow, like that's what it takes. Mm-hmm. And like, the PhD is just pursuing one topic, one contribution to the scientific community. And it pulls in a bunch of other things as well, but like, it's not the single-minded focus that is necessary to be the absolute top of your field. But when it comes to deciding what you want to do with your life, I think that it is reckless to just pursue exactly what you want to do without seriously considering the impacts that it will have on your future and your life. And I don't actually think that's a sad thing either. I could eat blackberries all day because I like wild blackberries, and I will probably eat them until I throw up. Yeah. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to throw up. And my body automatically is like, no. And so my body is smarter than I am in the sense that it will tell me, that's maybe not a good idea. But our brains will still tell us, okay, my body will tell me, realistically, you cannot eat this many blackberries because if you do, you will be sick. And it will stop me by making me feel sick before I actually am sick. But like, your brain won't tell you, like, maybe you shouldn't pursue this career that is actually not a good idea. You'll just do it, and then you'll be in the situation and be like, crap, that was not a good idea. Mm-hmm. So you have to
Are you there? You're not there.
No, because I am fortunate because I am interested in something that is largely transferable and is rather lucrative.
If you couldn't make money off this, would you stay on this path? Money stopped being a thing tomorrow.
Ooh, that's a great question.
Would you stay on this path, or would you start writing?
For all the work that I put into it, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. That's a really good question. Realistically, I would probably look at, and this is what got me into nuclear engineering in the first place, really, was it's like, nuclear engineering is the most like physics. And then when I got into grad school, I wanted to go to grad school for fluids, actually, and I found out that radiation detection was more physics. And so it's like, what is something that is parallel to what I'm really interested in, but might not be exactly the mark? Give me the
you can't
90%.
You can't make money on a physics degree.
You can, actually, but okay. I didn't know this at the time. You can make tons of money on a physics degree. A lot of people get a physics degree, and then they go out and they work for finance companies developing simulations, and software and modeling for like financial trends, because everything runs on these derivatives like DDX and like so on, and like just these mathematical models. And as a physics student, you pick up skills, not just how does, heat transfer work, but those equations of how heat transfer work, they're applicable in so many other cases. And so that's what a lot of people find themselves doing. There was a postdoc that I worked with at a national lab. He was a postdoc in nuclear engineering, and he got a job on Wall Street working on software design, and he is making tons of money now, I'm sure.
But do you think, so if he took the amount of time he spent in the past 20 years pursuing this,
20 years?
Or
how old do you think I am?
No, him, your friend on Wall Street. Or like I guess
okay.
let's use you for an example. Your past year of the time you spent working and contributing to whatever the machine that is society. Like you spent that time pursuing something that's close to what you want, but not exactly what you want. But at what point does spending time now for dreams that you'll get to spend your time in the future how you want, at what point is that not worth it? Like,
and I think the point that becomes not worth it is when you're doing something that you don't want to be doing.
Okay.
I think, and again, I am, it's hard to say because I'm not in a position where it's like, interior design or journalism or something, these degrees that unfortunately don't have very many job prospects. I don't know how those skills are transferable, but if I can look at what is interesting to me about physics, and I can see where I can get that in other places, and I can pursue those and not be heartbroken. I don't think I'm going to get to the end of my life and go, gee, I wish I had pursued a physics degree instead, because I think my life is rich in what I'm doing. And I think that if you put at least for me, when I put my mind into things and they're stimulating and like, approaching new problems, you have a similar approach every time. You get in, you have no idea what's going on. You see what knowledge you do have, how it applies to the problem, and what you're lacking in. You go and you find new things, rinse and repeat, and basically troubleshoot until you understand the problem. And that's a sort of process that is interesting in many, many places, and including physics and including what I'm doing. And so it's like, the big picture is very interesting, but the small picture of what you're doing on a day-to-day is also very interesting. And like I talked to my girlfriend she got her degree in German, but now she's pursuing accounting. And like I've talked to her about what is, why accounting? Like honestly, it's, at least to me, it's not the most glamorous and it's not the most interesting thing in the world.
Calling out your girlfriend on TV.
I mean, like
You'll get around to it.
I've talked to her about it, and she's like, yeah, but like, I had a feeling I knew what was so interesting to her about it, because it's like she goes in and she just solves puzzles all day. Why is this number not what it should be? Now I have to go track down what's causing this number. Her boss used to be a forensic accountant, where like you go in and you look at accounts that look normal and you try to find where there's a bug and trace back, how are people laundering money or this sort of thing. And just like that sort of puzzle solving, the glamour of the whole field of physics is desirable to me, and the glamour of nuclear engineering might not be as desirable to me, but the day-to-day is still very desirable to me. And so
more
weighing
applicable
those things,
to the world we're living in.
Yes, and so it's like it's a sort of, I'm sure that Tori would much rather be actually just doing puzzles all day, but like her work gives her that, while also being applicable and also earning her, bread on the table. And
so what's appealing to physics for you? Not to completely throw it off.
I mean, that's not completely throwing it off. What's appealing to physics is, it's like, why? It's like, that's the question that's driven me my whole life for everything that I am. You asked me a long time ago where it's like, what is your reason to be, basically? And like, I said, I didn't have one. And like, that's still mostly true. I don't have one reason, but like, if I had to pick one, it would be why. Like asking how and why do things do what they do, and just trying to learn and understand everything I can. And like, I have no idea why some things are more interesting to me than others. I don't know why it's more interesting to me how, how atoms decay in a certain way, what forces are going on in there. I don't know why that's more interesting to me than like, how does this plant sprout its leaves, which is also interesting to me. And like I said, my interests kind of go all over the place. And so sometimes I'm more interested in certain things than others, but like, I don't know what makes people interested in what they are. I know that for me, what's interesting about physics is it's asking why things work. And nuclear physics, atomic physics, nuclear engineering and all that is what is the building blocks. And nuclear physics is very interesting because to me it's like it's the very small, but there's also interplay with the very large. Nuclear fusion is what makes the sun go. And I study stuff like fission and fusion, and so it's like there is some applicability on the very small and the very large, these crazy, cosmologically big problems and issues, and it's all sort of tied together in physics. And I mean, physics is just, why does this world work the way it does in the most basic sense? And it's like, wow.
So I want to come back to your thoughts on just energy and why, and like some maybe pet thoughts you've had on it. But first off, I want to go back to, you said you have like sprouting off kind of interests, and I think everyone does. And the current education system, which is kind of what I wanted to talk to you today, doesn't really help people. Like I think more of a Montessori system where it's like you get to kind of practice what you have interest in at the time would be a much better system. Like the current one, you go to school and a bell rings, you get up from your station, go to another station, like a factory worker, and your teacher's like, the bell goes off, the bell doesn't let you go, I let you go to get you ready for your boss is saying, hey, you have to stay late today. It's pretty much just preparing your kid to go be a minion in the current system.
Are you talking about high school or are you talking about college?
College was the same for me. At least up until high school is that system. College was... okay, you have some more of... I don't know. Because coming from... I just graduated with a degree in kinesiology. And I guess to apply this, I don't know, something when you were talking, I'm like, really what you learn about shapes the way you think. So whatever you spend more time... Like a physicist views the exact same thing that I see with a kinesiology degree completely different. I see how it applies to your human body physically and mentally, and he thinks how it applies to the universe. So I guess we should give kids the option, like all the way up till 25, I'm still a kid, the option to learn what they want so they can change their approach at learning new things rather than, no, you have to read Lord of the Flies, because the kid isn't going to do it. No one wants to do that.
Except
it doesn't
the kid
matter.
does it. The kid does do it.
Did you? I didn't.
I did. I read Lord of the Flies. It was pretty good.
I don't know.
Read a lot of books. They were pretty good.
I don't know. Do you think the education system is good as it is?
I think everyone has a bone to pick with our education system.
What would your bone to pick be?
I mean, I think that I'm not in education for a reason, at least not in high school education and middle school and elementary school and all that, for a reason, and it's because there are certain problems that just aren't really stimulating to me, and this is probably one of them. But I do think it's an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that
what are some problems that are stimulating to you?
I mean, like freaking nuclear engineering problems. That's what's stimulating to me, and a bunch of other things too, but that's beside the point. I'm not going to give you a laundry list right now. But in terms of school and education, I think that you're right. They don't allow for creativity. I think that schools would benefit a lot more from pushing depth of thought as opposed to breadth of thought.
Learning how to think.
Yes,
and that's memorization.
What I mean, to me, that's what college was a lot more about learning how to think and shaping how you think than actually just learning things. That being said, holy cow, you still need to have some rote memorization in some things.
Yeah.
If you are living in this country, you should absolutely know like what the Civil War is. I am of the opinion that there should be a like world religions course that is mandatory in high school and is taught completely non-biased sort of way, and just introducing you to the world's religions, because like, wow, like how many people are religious in this world? Like 6 billion, over 6 billion, something like that. Like, and some people don't actually know that, you know, God, Allah, they're like the same thing. Like, that is inexcusable. And you see so much fear and anger and frustration about these religious differences. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if everyone actually like knew what these things like were? Like that's pretty important. But in terms of like, you know, what should we be doing in college? I think project-based things are a lot better than, you know, worksheets. And I think that reading books in English class, including Lord of the Flies, is a good thing. I think that you should read those things because I think it's introducing you to thoughts. And I think that one could argue like, oh, why wouldn't you let the kids just read what they want to read? And it's like, because if you're trying to teach a certain process, like a certain way that the author is conveying ideas or a certain idea in general, and you can let kids pick whatever you want, like I'm sorry, but certain books just don't have that idea. And it's easier for the teacher to teach ideas when there's one book and everyone's on the same page. And you could then go and say like, oh, easier, like that's what it comes down to. And it's like, yes, that is what it comes down to, because in reality, we only have so many teachers for so many kids. And so you have to have some sort of common ground.
But couldn't they just take out what you're learning from reading all of Lord of Flies and just distill it into like probably a couple paragraphs, like 15 minutes? Most books, maybe there's some very, very complex, but okay, so if you take, what do you learn from Lord of Flies?
Why are you making this podcast? Why don't you just take down what I'm saying and make a bullet pointed list and just give it to people to read?
Ideally, that's kind of what it is. So you spent a long time developing these thoughts. Like each thought that you probably bring to this conversation is something that took weeks to months to develop.
Yeah.
And yet you can tell people in a very short amount of time. This is essentially my way of letting people who have developed very specialized skills and thought patterns share it with people who haven't. So people with an open mind who want to see how other people think can get an insight into, oh, that's an interesting way to think that I haven't thought about.
There's a lot to reading books that, I mean, it goes beyond, you know, a bullet pointed list. There's a societal factor to it and a cultural factor, and just like knowing the world around you and actually understanding things. I've said, you know, several times that I'm an omnivore. And honestly, sometimes it's like, man, maybe I should just like go vegetarian. Yeah, meat tastes good in a lot of things, but maybe I should just go vegetarian. But like, there's so much culture and history in the preparation of certain types of food that I would just be barring myself from an entire societal that's been around since like the dawn of humanity. Like, this is a huge part of our society. And so it's like, well, you know, I could give it up and that would be good. Probably that would honestly be good. But like, I don't want to miss out on that. And like, if you've never read, you know, certain snippets of the Bible, if you haven't read a couple of these classic novels that, you know, are referred to often, you're missing out on a lot of things. A lot of things are referenced and cross-referenced and add depth to just your, like, the bulk societal knowledge of things. But not only that, like some things about the novels, like you gain more from it by actually watching things happen as opposed to just being told. Like, you know, you're gonna get a lot more from watching, you know, a season of The Wire compared to someone saying...
But you do now, and I think people are projecting that that's how they learn onto kids. When you're a kid and you watch a movie, like maybe subconsciously you learn a little thing in there, but you really like... I mean, there has to have been a book that you read as a kid and then you read as an adult and you realized, oh, I didn't even realize that there were like those themes and those messages in there, because they completely go over the head of kids. Kids aren't looking, they just literally looking at it as like the most basic, superficial story plot line.
Yeah, well, how do you learn to not do that?
time. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
this whole
yes.
thing is coming from the place that, I mean, I wrote a book and I've written a couple screenplays. I really like storytelling as a way to convey ideas.
Yeah.
But by doing it, I realized this is not the best way of conveying ideas. Since my more or less goal is distributing knowledge to people who couldn't ordinarily get it, like very specialized, like taking something that someone spends 10 years learning, and like obviously you can't learn all of the little meditations and things you've learned along the way, but you can dispel a good amount of it in a couple hours, maybe.
Well, I mean, that's why good schools, good classes, well-structured classes don't just have you read a book. They make you write a paper about a certain topic or a certain theme, and it makes you actually think about things. And this goes all the way back to like, someone having a PhD versus someone not, but having the same knowledge. And it's like, I am of the opinion that school, a lot of the time, is about giving people accountability to demonstrate and apply the knowledge that they are learning. And like, I've read so many books. Do I write essays about the books that I read recreationally? Hell no. I haven't written an essay about a book since high school.
I think you bring up a good point that it is about the writing, but the whole problem with that is that you get graded on it. So you're not writing it. You're not reading and writing an essay to better understand it and learn lessons. You're doing it to technically pass. Like that is what really stops people from learning, I guess.
But like, your passing grade is demonstrating that you have learned something.
I think it's a hoop. I'm someone who, I think we went through school and life very different ways. I saw school and life as one big hoop, and I didn't really learn that much from it, but I learned a lot outside of school. Like, that's why I learned most of everything I know to make this and stuff happen off YouTube. Just these free resources that weren't.
Yeah, and I mean, you're definitely going to learn more by pursuing things that you're actually interested in. And I am of the opinion that intelligence is just a byproduct of what you're interested in. Judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree and so on and so forth. But like, I am fortunate that I'm interested in math and physics and science because it lets me absorb the information much more readily than someone who is not. And it's like two South Pole magnets trying to put them together, and it's like, whoop, they just repel off each other. Try to get me to understand insurance or taxes, and they're so unbelievably boring. If you judge my intelligence by my ability to navigate taxes and insurance, you would think I'm a moron. I can do it, but like, oh man, it's a pain. But if you
more specialized,
and
so I guess that's what I'm saying. We should give kids the opportunity to specialize.
I think you're right.
That's where I'm coming from.
100% in agreement with that. But okay, so you give a kid an opportunity to specialize, but you also just said earlier that you should give kids the freedom to explore different things. And so it's like, those are two...
Freedom to pick what they specialize in. Like,
yes, but okay.
I dropped out of school for a year to make an album. I wouldn't have continued it until I pursued that.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I got there, I'm like, all right, I definitely don't want this. This isn't the answer for me. But until you allow people to go through those different, like, along the way from birth till 25, you have so many things where I'm like, I think that's the way that I'll most enjoy spending my time, that'll drive the most meaning. And you have to do it to figure out that it's not. And I don't think we're giving youth the opportunity to do that yet.
I think a lot of what school is, and especially a lot of what school is becoming, but because there's a lot of changes, and if you especially look at the focus programs, which are somewhat gentrified, and that's a whole problem in and of itself, where you have problems with like IB and AP and so on and so forth, where you have these more project focused, more intensive learning sessions, but they're directed towards students who are already there. So you do have some gentrification and issues with that. But what school is doing is it's giving you as much, as much autonomy over your future as it can, because it's not just, from 5th grade to 12th grade teaching you math. Like, there are some schools in other countries where it's like you find out in 6th grade that you're going to a certain route and that they're going to teach you a different way. And you are basically tracked from 6th grade to your death of going into a STEM field? What if I don't really want us to be in a STEM field? When I was a kid, I either wanted to be a scientist or priest. Can you imagine if instead of going this route, I had been put on the track to be a priest?
I think it would have changed the way that you view the upcoming events so much that I think you wouldn't be like, man, I wish I went into a STEM field.
Maybe you're right.
I think you'd be a completely different person.
You're absolutely right. But what I'm saying is like, school gives you the opportunity to pursue things, and people are going to screw up. And I think a bigger issue is that right now we're kind of telling people that you can do whatever you want. You can take out whatever loans you want. You can do this, you can do that. And then they've kind of gotten themselves into a hole. So it's like your freedom to choose whatever you want can sometimes be very problematic when you have people who are choosing to get their degrees in, I don't know, some...
Who are you gonna call out here? Liberal arts?
Yeah, I was thinking that. Like, who am I gonna call? You know what? I'm gonna call out basket weaving, because no one basket weaves as a career. And if they do, wow, I am so sorry I marginalized your field. But let's say someone goes and gets a degree in basket weaving, and they get into $100,000 into debt by taking 4 years of basket weaving and get their basket weaving BS. Like, wow, now I'm 22 and I have my BS in basket weaving, and it's totally not applicable, and I've found that it's not really that interesting to me. But now I'm stuck because I'm $100,000 in debt. I can't go bankrupt on student debt. If I die, my family gets the debt. And so what do I do now?
Sounds like you're projecting here, man.
I mean, I'm not projecting. I like what I do. And I mean, I am a little bit grouchy about the fact that I have almost 6 figures of debt myself, but I'm going to be able to pay that off.
It's a strange idea. So I've actually started writing down, I mean, it could be called manifesto, but that has connotations to it. So I'm just calling it, so I haven't really named it yet, but I'm just writing down my thoughts of the current system. Mm-hmm. And as it currently is, you get born, you go into an education system that I do think has merits. Like, it lets you taste different things. Like, you can taste chemistry and STEM and writing to see what you actually want to go into. And you found that you want to go into engineering. But I mean, whatever age you pick that at 18, that's way too young to pick what you want to invest $100,000 in the next 6 years of your life into.
I mean, you're right. But that sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
But I mean, the thing is, like, it sucks because when you're going to decide when you're 22, okay, so let's shift it back to 22 now. Now let's shift everyone back to 22.
I think that happens. I think people don't actually decide what route they're going in life often until 30s and 40s.
I think sometimes you're right. I think sometimes you're right, but I think a lot of times you're wrong. At least for the people who go to college, you're not wrong. And I think it is a problem when you have all this debt that you've built up that you have to work your way out of when you decide this wasn't for me. But once you're 18, you have to get supported by some way, and you can either just go and work, but that's 4 years of your life. Like, it's like interest on things. You know, if I put $10 in the bank now, it's going to be worth more than if I put $10 in the bank in 5 years. In 5 years, right? Because interest, it builds up and it pays on itself. And so if I go and I invest my time now into becoming a professional, I'm going to have my entire working life of benefiting from being a professional and being able to apply my skills and learning more. And so it feeds into itself all the time. Whereas if I don't start until I'm 25, right now,
but I'm not saying people just dig around till they're 25. I'm saying we need almost like part of our taxes need to go toward younger people to just support them so they don't have to work 40 hours a week supporting them. Like, just give them, okay, but you have to be pursuing goals. Like, if you could have gotten a super introductory knowledge to what you're in and then been like, oh, I think I'm more interested in physics, and then like 1 year in you could have changed completely your path to physics, don't you think that would have been more beneficial than being like, well, you're kind of already on this path?
I mean, people do that all the time.
Yeah.
People do that all the time, and that's fine. I think that it's made very difficult by the crisis that is the student debt crisis, and I don't know how to fix that. And again, this is not a problem that I'm interested in, and I don't pursue it. And you know what? I think it's reckless for me to have any opinions about it, to be honest with you, because people have spent their entire lives researching these issues. And what am I, scrawny guy in Oregon learning nuclear engineering going to offer anything worthwhile to
Good point.
the student debt crisis?
Because you're someone who just went through it. All the people currently looking at it probably aren't people who just graduated with a bunch of student debt.
But
You just lived through that.
yes, and this is true.
Like, instead of being like asking historians, hey, what was the Holocaust like? Like, there's some people who went through and lived in concentration camps. Don't you think they are also worth asking about it?
I think they're worth asking. I think they're worth asking, but that doesn't mean that they have a solution to the problem.
No, not a solution. I'm just curious your thoughts
Yeah.
on the whole process.
I mean, it sucks. It sucks that I have like 6 figures of debt. I wish that I had gotten more, but the thing is, it's like, okay, well, my dad earned he busted his ass his whole life working 60, 70 hours a week at a blue collar job to be able to have the money to support us. And that meant that I didn't get any government aid because we earned too much as a family. And it's like, well, I don't earn too much. What if my parents didn't want to support me? It happened to a friend of mine. His dad was a software designer. He earned 6 figures. His son didn't get any money. The dad's like, that sucks. And now my friend is in 6 figures of debt and his dad won't give him a dime. And I mean, that's very, very unfortunate. But how are you going to judge it? Because, okay, you could judge it off the student's earning potential. And it's like, okay, well, no student has earning potential, or like 99% of students have no earning potential at the time.
Minimum wage.
So it's like, how do you determine how to distribute your loans? Okay, well, let's just give the same amount to everyone. That because all the students are starting from basically the same place. Okay, but my dad actually can help me go to college, and someone else's family can't. Just like straight up can't. Like can't even afford Wonder Bread. Like, how is that fair? And so it's like the best metric probably would be how much your parents are earning in terms of how we want to distribute this limited amount of money. There is also the economic problem of and we're seeing it like, holy cow, so clear, where you're giving people all of this money via loans and all of the schools are like, oh, everyone has more money. We can jack up our prices. Feeds into itself. And so that's why you've seen school prices go up like ridiculously high. And I don't know how to fix that problem. Some people will say, okay, just make the first 2 years of school free. And I don't know if that would fix the problem or not. It would certainly make it a flat rate where the schools couldn't really charge more because no one could go. But then that brings in questions of, well, what about my freedom? And I mean, you have that question in high schools and stuff for like charter schools and private schools and that sort of thing. What about my freedom? And, where do you draw the line between freedom and...
But what is freedom without financial freedom? Until you have financial freedom, you are essentially indentured servitude.
Well, I mean...
Like, except you can go home at night. Or like you have some, okay, if you're $100,000 in debt, you're more or less enslaved financially to the system.
You are 100% correct. I agree with you. And so I think it's a shame that a lot of people don't understand this and they get themselves into very difficult positions and they have to live with their consequences of like, oh, I took out a bunch of money to do this thing and I can't go bankrupt and I'm just utterly up the creek without a paddle. Like that totally sucks. I don't know how to help.
Do you think we should forgive those loans?
I don't know what impacts it would have on our economy.
True.
So like morally, yes, I do.
Me too.
Logically, probably. But like my logic is coming from a place that is not
you don't know the fine details.
Steeped in the banks and steeped in this and steeped in that. It's like there's a really interesting podcast that is put out by This American Life, the great big pool of money or pile of money or something like that about the housing crisis. And they talk about the housing crisis and the logic that actually went into how the housing crisis could have possibly happened. And it's really amazing how it happened. And like, it's just stuff that you wouldn't really think like, wow, this is how it works. So many people don't actually know how finance works. And like, oh, you want people to have the ability to get whatever loans they want. And it's like, okay, well, someone has to give those loans. Who gives the loans? Okay, the banks. How do you make it so that the banks can actually, give those loans? And then you have something like insurance And this is a huge one where it's just like, I'm over here scratching my head because like everyone wants to have insurance. And I agree that everyone should have insurance, but everyone should also be paying into insurance if you can. And I think it should be a priority that this is where your money should be going. And so if you have only people who need insurance having insurance, insurance would not exist because insurance has to, in some way, be able to recoup the losses that it's paying for all of these other people. And so it's like, well, how do you do that? And it's like, you have no fault states for car insurance where everyone has to have insurance for the car. That's the point, is like everyone is paying into this pot of insurance so that if an accident happens, most people aren't going to get into accidents, but they still have insurance. And so they're still paying into that pot for those situations where people do get into accidents. And it's the same sort of thing with loans. It's the same sort of thing with insurance. It's just like, there's always the game of the buyer and the seller, the taker and the provider. And I feel like society always is demonizing the provider and always on the side of the receiver or the buyer. And it's like, I mean, I'm usually the buyer, so it's like you're right. But at the same time,
I think it's because I think the provider most of the time is taking too big of a cut. If they took like how much it cost to repair the cars of people who got in an accident that year, and you paid proportionally, like if you'd gotten in an accident, you pay more than someone who drives really safe. Like if we paid into that proportionally, I think it'd be no, but the insurance companies also take a large portion of the money.
Do they?
That's my understanding.
What portion?
Probably too much.
I don't know, but how do you know?
I mean, how much do you pay for car insurance per year, roughly?
Less than $500.
Less than 500. And Oregon has 160,000 people. Or I mean, Eugene has 160,000 people, I think. But anyway, so if that many people are paying that much money, do the amount of accidents that happen in Eugene cost that much to repair? I think it's a lot lower.
I don't know, but you also have to talk about, one guy isn't doing this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are employed. There's a lot of costs that you don't see. And so it's like, am I sitting here siding with the auto insurance companies? Not really, because I don't know how it works, but there are people who are paid lots of money to calculate out
Good point.
this stuff. Actuarial science, I think. Maybe I might be totally wrong. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's with like investing. I'm not sure. But like people are paid a lot of money to weigh these probabilities and these risks and find out optimal costs, because you put the cost too high and eventually people are going to be like, it's not worth the cost, the risk. I'm just going to risk not having insurance. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do that with health insurance, and it's like, that's not good. And so like there's a sweet spot there of how much you're going to charge people and turn a profit to make it worthwhile to even be in the business, because if it's not worth it to be in the business, just go elsewhere.
Do you think it should be a business, or do you think those sort of things should be covered by the government?
I think it depends on what it is. I think something like health insurance, it should probably not be a business. I don't know how we're going to get there, but I think that health insurance should be something that's automatically taken out of your taxes, so you don't even have a choice to pay into it or not.
Same with auto. Might as well do it with more. But then you have to trust your government.
Well, you also have to acknowledge the fact that not everyone has a car. Not everyone needs a car. And so I think that auto insurance is probably fine being a
Good
private.
Point.
I think auto insurance is probably fine. I think that anything not anything, but most things in terms of like insurances would probably be better if they were run by a single entity. And in a perfect world, that would be great. You know what? I think in the perfect world, a country would be best run by one dictator.
AI.
But
something that doesn't need money to extract money out of the process.
Well, yes, but I'm saying like barring AI, mm-hmm. the best way to run a country is probably one person making all the decisions. But inherently, there's so much abuse of power in that it could never actually, like in practice, be implemented without disastrous consequences. And so by no means am I in support of any sort of dictatorships at all. No, I like what we have. But there's certainly inefficiencies embedded in it. Things don't get, things get overturned every time there's an administration switch, and things take forever to get done, and so on and so forth. And it's like, well, how do you avoid those problems? And it's like, I don't know. Churchill said, I think, that like democracy is the worst form of government except all the other ones that have been tried.
I think they said that about capitalism. Capitalism.
No, it was democracy.
Was it really?
It was democracy. Definitely democracy. But like, I'm not sure about what should and should not be done by the government. I love certain things that the government does, like libraries. We have the ability to get knowledge. I do think I've come to this conclusion, especially strongly and especially quite recently, that would a racket be a correct term? I'm not really sure, but it's definitely a scam. I do think that universities and degrees are to some degree a scam. In some cases, no. I don't think I would be able to be where I'm at without an actual university education, the things that those provide me. But like, Tori took some community college classes, and community college classes, they're a couple $100, and they were online, and she didn't like them at first, but she came around and she learned a good bit from it. Now she's taking a course at a university, also online, well-known university, paying 3-4 times as much, and the lectures are a total waste of time. The homework is a total waste of time. The whole class is a joke. She's learning basically nothing. The professor is trash. There's no feedback, individual feedback. And it's like, but this is the university. This is the place she has to go for this course. She has to pay this premium price. And really, how is she learning? She's teaching herself out of the book. But you still have to pay, how many thousands per credit? $900 per credit or something at a university? That's absurd. That's criminal activity as far as I'm concerned.
That's gentrifying knowledge.
As gentrifying knowledge. Well, no, it's not gentrifying knowledge. It's gentrifying opportunity.
Yeah.
Not even the accessibility of knowledge, because anyone can go and pick up that book. It's gentrifying the opportunities that knowledge offers, because you can't even get looked at if you don't have the degree. And so for something like a PhD, again, going all the way back to that question, it's different because there's a lot more that goes into a PhD. But in terms of a degree at all, if I was tasked to hire someone who got a nuclear engineering bachelor's degree to work as a technician in my lab versus someone who actually had 5 years of experience working as a technician in a lab, you better believe I'd be hiring the technician, like 99.9% of the time. But
then how do people get that the first year of that 5 years in the lab? That's the whole thing, is how do people
without a degree?
Break through zero? Yeah, without a degree, or even with a degree. It's hard because everything requires however many 2 to 5 years of experience. Like, how do you get that first experience, when you're in debt?
Started at the bottom, now you're here. Like,
yeah,
but seriously, so like, not.
But you wouldn't hire someone who has no experience and no bachelor's to work as a technician at your lab.
Well, that depends. It depends on how much I would be paying them. And I know Oregon just passed a thing recently where like companies have if you're in a, I'm pretty sure they passed it. I know that this was a big thing at where my girlfriend is working, where anyone that's in the same sort of job qualification, like job title, regardless of differences in experience or seniority or whatever, has to get paid the same amount. And this is a perfect example of the government getting their hands where they should not be. And big supporter of government intervention. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sitting here touting, supporting insurance companies and saying like the government shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. But like, I actually am it's easier to criticize something I'm supporting and what they do wrong.
Good point.
And so like, I'm criticizing the government here because I support them, but holy crap, you should not be doing this because, if I'm working in a job for 40 years versus you just got hired first day, we should not be getting paid the same because yes, I'm older. So like seniority, but like seniority isn't just like I'm older. Seniority is I have so much more experience and there are problems that will come up and I can just do the job better. than you. And so, I mean, you could get around that by creating a different job title for every single person, but like that's ridiculous. And so you're causing a lot more work than you need. You probably have to hire a whole nother person to just do this. So you're costing the companies more money and you're not making anybody happy. In terms of getting that first start, you have to start low and grow high. When I started in nuclear engineering, I was putting labels on electronics in the lab and mapping out like a circuit board that was already done. I just had to like draw it like on paper. And then like that's where I started. And then I moved up to simple, smaller projects. And then people saw, oh, you have experience with silicon photomultipliers. Well, come right in. We're going to teach you how to do this. And you can leverage your knowledge with things that you don't know and learn those things that you don't know. And now you have more knowledge where you can leverage against things that you don't know. You know, it's, at least in my experience as a, you know, pursuing jobs now, because I'm almost done. So I'm applying for a lot of jobs. I'm doing interviews and so on. And it's like, no job is written for you, at least in my field. You can be like 90% qualified, but it's never written for you. And so you have to use the knowledge that you do have and apply it in a new way. And that's how it goes. So how can you put yourself in situations where you might get skills that are applicable? And at the end of the day, someone does need to take a chance on you. But I think that those chances can be increased by, you know, the money. For example, I'm just leaving school. There's a postdoc position. So basically it's like you've been in school, you've been a grad student, you've probably done internships while you've been there. So you have some experience in the field and you have a lot of education. You've done your PhD, blah, blah, blah. Now you want to go get a job at a university or at a national lab. How can we possibly trust you over, you know, someone who has shown for a decade that they know what they're doing? Well, there's a different position. It's called a postdoc. And the postdoc position is sort of like an intermediary where your job is to work a ton at a lower wage and publish a ton of stuff and develop your technical signature is what they call it, at least in my field, where it's like you develop a sort of idiom for yourself. People recognize your work. People recognize the work that you do. And then you can say, you know, why are you applying for this job? Why should we hire you? And it's like, oh, well, I've worked 2 years on this project. Mm-hmm. And this has given me skills A, B, and C. And so while this is different than yours, I do have some skills that are very transferable. And I've written this in several cover letters that I've gotten calls back about. And they've said, you know, like you're right. You know, you haven't worked on gas detectors, but you've worked on solid state detectors, and they work using a similar operating principle. And so that is something that you can do. We believe that you can do it. So
that's more than I can even try to encapsulate, but kind of what I got from that was just develop highly specialized skills and know how to exchange it into other kind of place. Not
so much highly specialized, but applicable skills. So yes, some specialized skills, but applicable skills more than anything. Again, like if it, you know, you can move up the ropes in one job position. You can go from, you know, again, going from, not my personal experience, but my girlfriend, she went from accounts payable to bookkeeper to assistant controller, mm-hmm. because this had some skills that were relevant in this. She showed she was really good at job A, so she moved to job B, and then there was a need for someone in job C, and she had shown how good she was at job B and showed potential for growth, so they took her and they put her in job C. Yeah. And like that's how it is. It's leveraging your skills that you currently have, mm-hmm. for a job.
I think this is where the whole breakdown comes from. I think we have a different idea of what we're maybe like, so someone who does that, like, what is, if you're being accounting for some firm, like, what is it working? It's kind of like the Lipitor causes a problem that they have a solution for. Like, I think a lot of jobs created are like just being like just wasting time, more or less. Like, there's all those people who designed Lipitor, even though it lowers your or increases your cause of all mortality, all cause mortality, which created the ED problem, which created people making Viagra to cure that, which already wasn't needed. Like there are these like circles that it's like none of that's needed, but I'm sure there's like thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars that go toward it. So the system as I see it and the way that you present it of you just start at the bottom and you just spend a lot of your life working up would be, it's like, I think that would be cool if we could trust our government and trusted that what we were working toward was a better future where people were happier, healthier, and freer. But I think the current system we're working toward, like say you eventually do progress and you're getting paid more, 30% of that tax money goes to the government or, you know, of some sorts. But then the federal government, 60% of what they take, or 56%, over half, goes toward the military. And yeah.
False.
No, you can look it up.
The vast majority of it goes towards Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Vast majority. Like over 2/3, I'm pretty sure. I know so. I know that like over 30% goes to Social Security.
Okay.
I was very surprised to find this out. Didn't I talk to you about the federal prison thing? How everyone makes a big thing about how most prisons are privately owned, and it's like 4% are actually privately owned, and most of them are actually governmentally owned. But everyone makes a big stink about the 4%. And it's like, I wanted to ask you, you know, you saw this thing about Lipitor, and you saw this thing about Viagra, and you saw it from one source. Being owned by the same company. Being owned by the same company, and one causes the problems that, you know, is fixed by the other. And sometimes these conspiracies or, you know, money-making schemes are true. But I implore people to take the advice of the video itself and learn your own facts. Don't, you know, this, a lot of people, they'll see what's going on and then they'll find alternative information that's like, actually, those things are lies. This is true. And it's like, oh, well, clearly this is true. And it's like, no, you've just exchanged one demon for another. You aren't actually doing any research yourself. And so it's like, you know, is Lipitor actually not necessary? You know, a lot of people now they're railing against antidepressants because, oh, antidepressants are overprescribed, blah, blah, blah. I know a lot of people who have actually had a lot of help from antidepressants.
I don't know about that one here. Like, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why? I mean, I'm sure it helps some people, but in the stage 3 clinical trials of the SSRIs that I saw, they barely beat placebo, and they didn't beat things like exercise, eating right, and getting enough sleep. So it's more or less a bandage for something for not fixing the actual problems that causes it. Like, you're going to be depressed if you're not getting enough sleep, you're eating unhealthy, and you're not exercising.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
And the fact that it doesn't even beat, like the placebo, and I think it helped like 30% of people, and SSRIs helped 40% of people. It technically beat the placebo, but fixing those core parts of your life helped far more people.
Oh, I mean, I agree with you.
So
and I think
SSRIs the answer?
I mean, not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. I think it's an option that should be explored the same way as other things. Is medication necessary for everyone? No.
Yeah.
Is sleeping
and it is being overprescribed?
I would probably agree with that. I think that it's easy to prescribe something rather than actually try to address the problem. And I think that counseling is something that a lot of people tout, and I think a lot of people are actually against it. And I think that
counseling, like what?
Like therapist?
I'm against therapy.
Oh, you should not be against therapy.
I don't know.
My good friend, you should not be against therapy.
I'm curious your thoughts.
I
think it can help.
As a side note, I think that sometimes eating right and exercise and getting enough sleep are all super important. And I don't think that the medicine is a substitute for those things. A lot of people could get by without the medicine. I don't think people should or could get by without eating right, exercise, and enough sleep.
And you don't do those things and you get the symptoms of being depressed and stuff. And then if you take the SSRIs to get rid of that, then you don't fix the problems.
Yes.
Is my understanding.
But what if you do those things and you're still having the problems?
Then it's totally valid. I'm not saying, but that's what people's argument is. People's argument is that it's overprescribed, which is kind of what you're saying too. I think if people, like if you go to your doctor and it's like, all right, you're getting roughly 8 hours of sleep every night. What are you eating? You're eating McDonald's? Fix that. I'm not going to prescribe you anything until you actually start eating better. Because I can prescribe you anything, but then you're still going to be eating bad, or if you know, and you need to have.
But what if the medication does fix the problem?
There's a whole other host of problems, symptoms that'll come up. I think depression's probably canary in the coal mine of health problems when you're doing things that systematically destroy your body.
I would agree with that.
And I think like being like, okay, well, a canary died. Well, here's an electronic canary. See, it's not chirping right now. Isn't the answer.
Yeah.
I think developing a coal mine where the canary is alive is the correct. But there's totally imbalances. I'm not saying everyone with SSRIs.
No,
should get off.
I think you're right. And I think, again, I know, and this is anecdotal. And like as a scientist, I kind of frown upon anecdotal evidence most of the time. But I do know someone very close to me who eats very well and sleeps well and exercises, and his life is going in a good way, but like he's got bipolar issues, and he started taking medication and his whole life turned around. And and a lot of times it's like you see people taking poor care of themselves, and it's like a lot of times the taking poor care of yourself is a manifestation of your depression. And so like I've dealt with situations where it's like, I'm dealing with all these things at school, and I'm so depressed, and it's like, oh well, like those things are depressing you, and it's like, no, those things are exacerbated by the fact that I'm already depressed. And so those things that would normally be surmountable are now not surmountable, or very, very difficult to surmount, because all I want to do is sit around and be sad. And so depression is vicious because the way to fix it is like the thing that, or not the way to fix it as if there is just one cure, but one of the best ways to address some of the issues is by doing things that you just don't want to do. Yep. And like even localized issues of depression. I have an extroverted friend who was like down in the dumps, and we were like, oh, hey, let's go to the fireworks, because it was around 4th of July. He's like, man, I don't want to go to the fireworks. So I was like, dude, come on, you'll feel great. If you go to the fireworks, you'll be around people. He's like, nah. And I dragged him to the fireworks, and he felt great because he was around people. He's an extrovert. He got charged up. And it's like, but if you're depressed, you don't want to go. Sometimes you need that external force, or you need to force yourself to do things. And a lot of people, they just don't want to exercise. Some people actually love to exercise. Me, I hate running. Sometimes I make myself run. I want to go on a big backpacking trip in a couple weeks. And so like I've been stuffing a bunch of heavy things in my bag and strapping it on and trying to walk up a mountain next to my house. There's a mountain next to my house. And like, it's miserable and I want to die when I do it. But like, I need to force myself to do it, to, do the things that I want to do. It's conditioning. It's mental conditioning. That's what it is. It's like conditioning your mind, conditioning your body so you can condition your mind by, taking care of yourself physically. And I agree with you so much that those things are irreplaceable, but sometimes they're not enough.
Yeah, I'll agree. But I'm curious, they should do a study of they give everyone, I know you can't get SSRIs, but something like SSRIs, but that you can get off easily. And then at some point when they refill it with sugar pills, and how many people are still getting all the benefits of the drug. Like start with the actual drug, so you actually feel the Adderall or whatever you're taking, and then switch it out and see if the placebo works after the fact. And
I think that would be great, but I think that there are so many ethical issues with that it just could never actually be done.
But they do it. Don't they give like cancer patients and stuff like just sugar pills instead of actual
I don't
things
think
occasionally?
so.
Well, how else do you test things against placebo?
People who actually like sign up for a test.
For new drugs, yeah.
For new drugs.
Good point.
But I mean, not in the field. Don't really know exactly how it's done, so I don't want to make any claims that are false.
That's such a weird place that you get to, especially with people in the like academia, more or less than just like average folks, is that when I ask a question, like a lot of it happened a lot in Dr. Massey's interview, podcast talk, whatever, is that he's like, I'm not qualified to talk about that. I'm like, no one's really qualified to talk about anything for the most part.
Yeah.
Like anything that you
I'm not
say,
qualified to talk about nuclear engineering.
right? Like exactly. So I'm like, I'm not like people listening, this isn't like a prescription, like, oh, this is the answer. I'm just saying from your life experience, I'm curious your thoughts. And
Yeah.
some people tend not to get that, but I'm like, I'm not. Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm not qualified to say that exercise is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying I'm not qualified to tell you how they do drug trials.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
yeah, no,
I
that's
don't
valid.
do drug trials.
Yeah, that's valid.
And you know, when I was younger, I had the habit of spouting off like I knew what I was talking about, and it's like there's so much more that you have no idea.
No one knows anything.
So
We're just trying our best. I know I should almost preface these entire interviews with,
by the way,
we don't necessarily know what we're talking about, so take this all
Yeah.
with a grain of salt. Like we're just kind of speaking from experience.
But like you hear people spouting off about politics, and like I used to be one of those people back in high school where I spouted off about politics all the time, and it's like you are in 11th grade, child. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes.
Have you read all of the history of Marx? Have you read all of the history of, you know, all these things? No, you don't. So why are you spouting off like you have any idea what you're talking about?
But because they're just buying propaganda. I think, especially in politics, over 100% of what you hear is propaganda. Even the stuff you don't even look at is propaganda.
Yeah.
It's paid. It's paid for changing your view on how you view them or their opponent.
It's painful as a scientist, and it's painful just as me as a person to watch like Democratic debates, because like it's easy for me to watch Republican debates because I can just be like, wow, you guys are wrong about everything. Or like, I mean, that's not entirely true, but like, man, I
there's some good
disagree
ones.
with most of the things that you're talking about compared to the Democratic debates where it's like, wow, I do support these things, and I have done reading about these things, and you are so like one-dimensionally misrepresenting what's going on.
Yes.
And it's like when people try to have an educated discussion about something and they have a like super, super vague understanding of what's going on, like you can't actually have any sort of constructive talk. And like, this is part of why, you know, democracy is the worst form of government except every other one that's been tried, because it's like people will vote for things that aren't working now, but you're not going to see the benefits for several years. And I was talking to my mom about this, and it's like, you know, the president can't actually do that much to affect the economy now. Like, the president can say things or try to, you know, direct policy and direct cabinet and so on to make changes to the economy that, you know, have long-term effects. But, you know, the economy we're dealing with right now isn't just Trump being awesome. And the economy that we're dealing with right now also isn't Obama being awesome. But, you know, that doesn't stop Trump from saying, like, oh, I fixed the economy, like, I'm running the best economy ever. And everyone's like, that guy's running the best economy ever. But you also don't, you know, you have liberals saying, like, Trump is just riding Obama's wave. And all the other liberals are like, Trump's riding Obama's wave. And it's like, it's so much more nuanced than that. Oh, my goodness.
It makes you just want to stay out of politics. Both sides
it really
are
does. It
equally
really does.
just bought into the propaganda.
Yeah,
for the most part.
it's just excruciatingly painful. And so...
Which brings me to the propaganda that you face when you... So if
yes.
that as a nuclear... Someone in nuclear. If you even want to have a discussion with someone who doesn't know about nuclear, but I've read a Forbes article about 5 reasons nuclear energy won't work.
You
or
watched
stuff
that
like
Chernobyl thing, didn't you?
And yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious, what are some things that prevent a conversation about nuclear or about energy in general, like just particles vibrating? What are some things that often get in the way of a conversation even starting?
You know, I personally haven't really butted up against too many issues where people have just been outright like, oh, you're a nuclear engineer, I'm going to shut my ears. It does happen, but it's not very common. I once went to a store and like I got into a conversation with some older ladies, and they were like, oh, what do you do? One of them was like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to school for nuclear engineering. And the other one's like, oh, I'm sure he's still a good person. And it's like, oh, thank you. Like, go away. I think that the fundamental issue of like people not understanding like how radiation works or just like how reactors work in general is like it's not surprising, but it's still just kind of exhausting because I mean, and I've only been dealing with it for like 10 years, but like And also just people's natural inclination to not probabilistically weigh things appropriately. And I'm saying this as a human who also falls into this category because everyone does it. But it's like you look at the actual risk of like a reactor melting down probabilistically, and it's like so minusculely small.
But then
compared
something like
to
Chernobyl comes
But
out.
then something like Chernobyl happens, and
People are basing their thoughts and decisions on fear.
But then is there goes into the other of like people don't actually understand how reactors work because the Chernobyl reactor was inherently different than the reactors that we have in the United States, and so like the reactors that we have in the United States couldn't have that occur. They can't. They shut down.
And they didn't include that in the show.
Of course they didn't, because like Chernobyl is about Chernobyl, and I didn't watch the show, and I probably should, but I don't know. I can't speak on what the show covers and what it doesn't, but I know that Chernobyl was. I read someone said like, oh, like you can spread radiation like a cold or something. Like someone had radiation like on their hands, and then they like shook someone else's hand or something, and then like that person died or some nonsense like this. And it's like no, that can't happen. I mean, like you can have contaminated stuff on your hands that you would spread from person to person. I don't know what happened in the show, so maybe that is what happened. But like in terms of like, oh, I have been irradiated by like photons, like I'm going to go, give Tiger a hug now. Tiger isn't going to get like irradiated by photons. I've already been irradiated by the photons. He's not going to get more irradiated, conservation of energy. But
it's more like you're just going to die a horrible cancerous death.
Me?
Yeah.
It depends on how much radiation I get.
In the show, like they were touching the core and stuff like that.
Oh God, you're going to so totally die.
Yeah.
Like really fast.
Right.
Like you're probably not going to die of cancer. You're just going to die.
The show was almost like a hit piece against the concept of nuclear. Because it's like if hit piece comes out like, oh, Steven, whatever, he hates dogs. And then it's like, it turns out there's a ton of things where like, oh, maybe you as a 6-year-old once said you didn't like dogs, such as like way back then, nuclear energy is different. But then they redact it and like, oh, well, Steve's different now. He likes dogs now. But people would have to read that initial hit piece and then go also read another piece.
Well, I heard
you have to go read further to know that nuclear isn't like that anymore.
I heard that Chernobyl wasn't actually that like egregiously against nuclear or something like that. But I, again, didn't see it, don't know.
But people who watch it are like, oh shit, nuclear's bad. And the show doesn't make a point to say, hey, this isn't how it is anymore. Nuclear energy is a lot better and different now.
Well, I mean, nuclear energy was like that then, too. It was just the reactors that the Russians were using were built in a different way such that you could have issues like the RBMK Chernobyl reactor exploding. By the way, just as a PSA, the nuclear reactors that we have in the United States physically cannot blow up like a bomb. They have a fuel that is in them that makes it physically impossible for them to blow up like a bomb, like a nuclear bomb. So, sleep well at night, I suppose.
So what would a perfect situation be? Like if money wasn't necessarily a thing, would running the entire U.S. off nuclear be a good thing? Good solution? If
money was not an issue, like if you could just boop and like the power plants would be up, oh my God, that would be so awesome.
It would be much better?
Like, I mean, God, yes. But it shouldn't just be one fuel source. The thing is with nuclear is like you can build it anywhere that there's like a cooling source. You can build it next to rivers. You can build it next to things. By the way, when you build it next to a river, because you're like, whoa, like that seems like a terrible place to build a nuclear reactor. Like, why would you build it next to a river? But like when you have your reactor, you have your vessel, and then you have the, like, basically what it is a nuclear reactor is just controlled boiling of water. And the way that there's two main ways that they work, but like the one that I'm going to talk about is the PWR, pressurized water reactor, where you have your core and you have water flowing by the core, and the water is heated up by the nuclear reactions happening in the core. And then the water moves out here, and then you have a second tube, not one tube, many tubes, thermal exchange, and you have a second loop of water going through and coming into contact via like the tube's proximity with the water from the reactor. So you have loop 1 from the reactor, you have that water, and you have loop 2, which is water getting close to this water, and this water heats up and it turns into steam, and then you have a third tube, and this is the cooling tube, and that's like your river or something like that.
So it's twice removed, kind of.
It's twice removed, and so like the water in the reactor is super reactive, or super
ionized,
radioactive. It's there's probably a lot of stuff in there that you don't want to be touching. Could be wrong, actually.
But
I
that's
don't really
super contained.
Yes. Well,
today.
Yes, but like since like the 50s, this is the style of reactor we've had in the U.S.
Are there any thoughts on future reactors that are even better, or is it like...
We have been designing future reactors since the 1950s. They are still not built.
That's crazy.
That's the situation, and there are still people doing their PhDs on how to improve these reactors that still have not been built.
Does it ever feel hopeless?
Yes, all the time. The problem with nuclear is there's so much red tape about getting stuff established that by the time you actually build the reactor, nuclear is an extremely expensive fuel source or energy source unless you run it for like 40 years. And then you have all the decommissioning fees. And the thing is, like, that red tape is like kind of necessary, because if you didn't have it, then you could have accidents. So it's like you want this to be safe, but you have all this red tape getting things established in the first place, and so it becomes very expensive, and it's a shame. And then you have all these other designs that may or may not be better, but no one wants to actually build them because there's no
money in it.
There's yes, and like you need so much upfront. Westinghouse just went bankrupt recently, and they own like half the reactors in the U.S. Like, yeah, because like nuclear is just so expensive. And now we've made a lot of advancements. Like we have new reactors called NuScale. In Corvallis, they're actually working on it. But these are small modular reactors that are a lot cheaper and power a smaller group of people, like maybe small cities in comparison to like giant metropolitan areas. But they...
Cheaper, I assume?
Yes, significantly so.
So you just make one for each city if there's a water source.
Yeah, and I don't even know how it's... I think it might be passively cooled. I'm not 100% sure how NuScale works, but I don't know if you even...
A capitalist society doesn't inherently let this happen because it's not monetarily beneficial. So the government would have to...
Nuclear is pretty subsidized.
It is?
It is.
Okay, but like if say we wanted to make the switch to nuclear, the government would just have to be like... It would create a bunch of jobs. The only thing is the government wouldn't make a lot of money off of it. So why wouldn't the government just start building small cells at different cities?
I mean, it's like the only nuclear... I think there's 2 nuclear projects that are funded by the DOE, and NuScale is one of them. It's gotten like $250 million grant or something like that. It's got a lot of money behind it. So they are like actively investigating using this as a possible route for the future. And so it's good. It's a good technology. It really is. And they tested it where they like made the whole core go dry for 3 days. Like they just ran all the water out, and they were like testing it to see, is the fuel going to melt, or is the passive air cooling going to be enough to keep it chill? Mm-hmm. And it stays chill. That's another thing that I want to clear up. Like whenever there's issues or accidents, there's something called a scram, which all the control rods like go into the reactor core and shuts it down. So like whenever there's an issue, an earthquake or whatever, boom, reactor shuts off. The problem is that there's stuff that has been made in the fission process that continues to decay. So like you have your atom, and then you split that atom, and the 2 parts that come off, they're still reactive. And so they will decay. And when they decay, they release particles that end out in the end as heat. And so you need to be continuously cooling the fuel to make sure that all that heat has somewhere to go. Mm-hmm. And that's how you have meltdowns, is you can't cool your reactor core after it's shut down. Like I talked to someone, and someone's like, oh yeah, Fukushima didn't shut down. And it's like, no, it shut down like instantly. And they're like, no, it didn't. I'm like, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Like, yes, it did. It shuts down immediately. It's just the decay products continue to decay.
So could one in the U.S. melt down today? If not explode, could it melt down?
Yeah. Yes, given the proper circumstances. That being said, especially after Fukushima, there was a big investigation that went on to like all the nuclear reactors in the entire country and recommendations for improvements to basically try to make sure that that doesn't happen. But like the physics of the situation, yes, it could happen. Chances of it happening are really low, and like people are employed solely for like this job of probability risk assessment and saying, using this equipment, what are the chances of failure here, and here? What are the fail safes? And like that's a huge design principle of like a lot of design principles that you learn about in engineering. It's like you want to make it as best as you can with as little redundancy as possible. And nuclear is kind of the opposite as far as reactors go, where it's like, nuclear reactors, you want as much defense in depth and redundancy as you possibly can. You want 2, 3, maybe even 4 fail safes to make sure that, your system doesn't fail.
Yeah. So one kind of going off this, saying you have a well-running system versus a well-running coal or whatever the heck natural gas we're running today, and not even getting into the discussion of climate change, because you can have whatever, you could debate it forever, but just based on pollution. Is nuclear less polluting? Because I know the barrels that you get are bad. And so how so?
Extraordinarily so. Nuclear doesn't really emit anything into the atmosphere. I can't say like absolute zero.
But that's toward
because
climate change.
I don't know. Huh?
I'm not saying into the atmosphere. I'm saying, does it pollute our rivers and our cities?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't release anything. It doesn't release anything into the atmosphere. It doesn't release anything into the river. It doesn't release anything. And I can't say absolute zero because I don't know. But I know that if there are emissions, they are extraordinarily low. Like no health impact like whatsoever on the fish, on anything. The biggest impact that nuclear reactors have on the ecology of the area is you have a heat source that might cause like different plants to grow or something. So like you're now heating up a certain area of the river. That's why rivers are so nice, or like building it on an ocean or something like that, as opposed to like a small lake or something. But that in the end, you have the rods, you have the fuel, and it's waste. And some of it you can actually recycle. Most of it you can recycle. The U.S. doesn't do that for various reasons. But we don't recycle our fuel, unfortunately. But like you only use up like 1% of it, and you can get out like 4 or 5% and reuse it as fuel. Most of the stuff that goes into your reactor isn't actually burnable fuel. But
are we ever going to run out of fuel, like uranium?
Yeah, could happen.
And so if we did get completely dependent on it, would we be where we are with fossil fuels, but another place? Nuclear isn't like renewable then. You can't create uranium.
No, well, technically you can, but no.
Yeah,
no, you can't
not sustainable. It takes more energy to make it, kind of thing.
Correct. You can get it from the seawater. And there's a ton. There's an effectively infinite supply in the seawater.
So you're saying the
as far as
ocean
I'm aware, yes,
is radioactive.
I mean, uranium has a super long half-life. It decays super slowly. And so, like, if there was a piece of, like, uranium, I would, like, hold it in my hand. And
you would?
Yes, I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Whoa.
It decays so slowly. And also, this is another thing about radiation is, like, radiation isn't... and you know what? I should probably say I wouldn't want to hold the uranium in my hand. Well, you can buy depleted uranium online.
My
Just,
understanding
like,
of how it
purchase
worked, if it was radiating, like, yeah, it's really slow, but if it happened to shoot off one at the right time, could it hit you and knock off an electron and cause a cancerous thing somewhere on you?
I mean, it messes with your DNA. I don't know the health impacts specifically. I don't understand the mechanisms too deeply, but I know it can mess up your DNA. It can hit your DNA. And so that's how it causes cancer in the long term. But like your body is really quite amazing in terms of how it fixes itself in these situations, how the cell was like programmed to die if it takes too much damage and so on. But every time you damage a cell, there's a chance that it might become cancerous instead of killing itself. And so, but a lot of times those don't really go anywhere. They just end up dying in the end anyway, from what I understand. Yeah. But there's different kinds of radiation. There's photons, which are basically just really, really high energy light. there's electrons, and there's something called an alpha particle, which is basically just like a nucleus of a helium atom. So it's like really fat and heavy and has a lot of energy. But the thing is, because it's so fat and heavy, it hits your skin, it deposits all its energy right at the top, and it's done. So like I could just sit and like have an alpha source in my hand, and like
It won't do anything.
it's not going to really do much
But
at
if you
all.
ate it?
Oh, that would be bad.
Okay.
Because all of that energy would be being deposited on the insides of your organs.
Yeah.
And like my skin is dead. This is dead. And so it's like it doesn't matter that the radiation is hitting it. That being said, I mean, I still wouldn't want to like just, because some of those particles are going to penetrate deeper, but most of them are not. Like you can have a bulletproof vest, but do you really want to stand behind a bulletproof vest where someone, shoots at it with a Tommy gun?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
Electrons will penetrate further, and photons will honestly probably just go right through you and not do anything.
Are photons gamma rays?
The
Radiation?
gamma rays is what I'm mostly talking about. X-rays too.
And is that so? My understanding was that uranium just occasionally shoots off gamma rays.
Uranium primarily decays via alpha.
Okay. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And does it? I should know.
So you had something that decays really slowly, but it decays via gamma. So it's like constantly putting them off, like in random directions and stuff, depending on where it's.
Well, things don't really just like decay via gamma unless they're metastable. It's complicated.
Okay.
It's complicated.
So it's nothing we have to worry about.
I mean, like you're radioactive. Like you have things do release photons.
Yeah.
They do. They decay and they release photons, but it's a little bit more nuanced than
right?
just like, it just emits photon. Huh?
That's what light is, right?
Yes, but it's not. I mean, like the light that we see from the sun isn't due to. It is due to fusion, but like it's not like there's a fusion and then like light photons come off. The light photons are too low energy.
Yeah.
High energy stuff is released. But
speaking of high energy, so are there gamma rays just floating around the universe from various things that have happened somewhere?
yeah.
And so, do you think if one of those goes through you, what would that do to your body?
Like probably nothing because it's just going to pass right through you.
Really?
If it's high enough energy, it's just going to pass right through you.
It doesn't knock any proteins or anything.
No, probably not. The higher energy something is, like a photon, the more likely it is to not interact in things. It's just too high energy, and so if it's lower energy, the chances of it interacting are much better.
But then if it's even lower, like radio waves, then it really doesn't either.
And it passes through you as well.
Whoa.
So,
Okay.
yep. So that's why like ultraviolet can like give you cancer and stuff.
Do you have any fears of like 5G? I've heard that it's just strong enough that it can scramble DNA.
I know absolutely nothing about it. I would
Okay.
say I'm largely unconcerned because I doubt that it would be brought to market if it was like actually dangerous, but I don't know enough about it, so I can't really say.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's a weird thing where trusting your government comes, because they have systematically, like corporations and the government have systematically lied to us, as that video showed.
Yeah.
So it's like, I trust that it wouldn't come to market, but I'm like, if it means more money, there's a strong chance that something that causes a lot of people damage could come to the market.
Maybe. I'm not really sure. I don't know, but I know that like in terms of like physically holding uranium, I would probably have a glove on so I wouldn't like get it on
Take a
my
chance.
skin.
Yeah.
Well, so it wouldn't get on my skin, but like the actual uranium source is not really dangerous. And like depleted uranium is uranium as well. It just, it's more of a certain isotope than another kind. So like there's two really big natural isotopes. There's the one that's used in bombs and in fuel and then there's the other kind that decays much slower and is much harder to get to like split, and you use that on like tank plating and like armor piercing bullets and stuff because it's just really heavy, and it is radioactive, but it's like it takes like I think its half-life is 10 to the 8, so like 100 million years, or on the order of 100 million years, whereas like the uranium that's in bombs and like is used in fuel to actually like start up the reactor and make it run. Its half-life is like on the order of 1 million years. So in 1 million years, you have a chance of, the half-life, you have a big pile of uranium-235 nuclei, and after a million years, or some multiple of a million years, like half of those are going to be decayed away.
So what are your thoughts on, this is kind of a transition, just energy and you, knowing that you're going to decay someday, like, and knowing that when uranium decays, the half-life of it, that energy's still out there in the universe and it'll be recycled into something new.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that whatever you are is kind of similar? Do you think we're energy just like anything else? Or do you think, what are your thoughts on what happens when you pass in respect to what energy is?
I mean, it's hard for me to actually like know how to answer the question, because like in terms of what is energy, energy is like a tool that we use to describe something. Like energy, the I guess what energy is like light or heat, but like energy is just like a tool that we use to like balance our equations. At least that's how I think of energy, as a note-keeping device. But what's gonna happen? Are you asking like?
Now I'm actually more interested in what energy is then. But energy is also matter. Like this is just energy condensed, like a
E
really
equals
slow
MC
buzz.
squared. E equals
But then
MC
it's also light, and then time factors into that too, because if energy is dense enough, time distorts around it, or what is that? So pretty much everything is just energy.
No. I mean, yes. Again, energy is just like, there's a conversion between energy and mass. Energy equals m times the speed of light squared. So that's the conversion. And so, like, yes, matter is energy.
But it's not a converted. It's always both, isn't it? Or it's converted. It's either energy or it's matter.
Mass. Mass is energy. Energy is mass.
But it isn't. There's no conversion. It's
they're
like
equivalent.
They're both states at the same time. Like this. If I just lifted it up, then it would gain potential energy, even though it's still matter, right? Like the table.
Yes. Yes, but potential energy isn't like energy that it actively has. It's potential energy. Like a waterfall is like potential energy getting converted into kinetic energy as it's moving. And so this is what I mean by it's sort of a note-keeping device, where like, you know, you lift something up and it has so much potential. How much energy does it have? Well, it has this much. You put in energy to lift it, so now it has this energy. And then it has kinetic energy if you drop it. And, you know, it expends that potential energy, converts it to kinetic energy as it falls. And that's the Earth working its force on it and pulling it down. So it's doing work. Energy is just work that's being done.
So how does gravity translate to energy?
Yeah, answer that. And gravity, this is outside of my field. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak on this.
Okay.
There's gravity waves. There's something about gravity distorting space-time, and like the way that energy propagates through the fabric that is space-time. Gravity is weird. Gravity is actually like really weird because there's four fundamental forces: the weak force, the strong force, the electric force or electromagnetic force, and gravity. And electro-weak can be like on a baser level, I guess.
Just between atoms, like hydrogen and oxygen is strong.
Well, there's more. You can go even lower.
Three of those four is more or less just holding atoms and things together, or molecules together.
Yes, and there's more to it as well. Like the EM force, all particles interact with the world around us via the exchange of certain particles that are carriers of this force. And so the electromagnetic force, when a photon interacts with photons carry the EM force, I believe. No.
But so gravity is very different from those other three, though.
Electrons. Oh, shoot. Well, either way, I hope I didn't say something that was
it's fine.
Totally wrong.
No one's gonna fact check.
I know.
We're just throwing around ideas.
I know.
Okay.
I need to review my particle physics. Goodness. But all of these three forces are very, very powerful. at short ranges. The electromagnetic force is powerful like forever. The strong force is powerful at very, very short ranges, like the size of it within a nucleus. And then gravity is like stupid weak. It's like so weak. Like I have a paperclip on this table and I can take like a magnet and like pick up that. And that's the electromagnetic force beating Earth. Like I just beat Earth. That's how weak gravity is compared to, and like the big question is like, why is gravity so much weaker than these other ones? And how do they actually play together in the world that is particle physics? It's a complicated question, and people still haven't figured out
Why? Which is your whole thing.
Yeah.
Where has why taken you? What are some of the maybe thoughts you've had that don't have answers, just questions that you have?
Oh, well, now I'm thinking about the
Gravity.
electric
How
force,
weak gravity is.
No, I'm thinking of the electromagnetic force carrier and how I need to review particle physics, for goodness sake. That's really pathetic. But questions that I've thought about that don't have answers.
Or maybe they do. Just some thoughts that you've kind of had on your why journey. That might be putting you on the spot. That's a lot.
That's a big question. A lot of those questions I've kind of worked out answers for myself that may or may not be wrong. Like intelligence is one. Like what is intelligence? And I described what I think intelligence is earlier. Intelligence is just a byproduct of what you're interested in and your environment and being able to quench that. Like I think everyone at some point has the question of why are we here? And I don't know.
You figured out why you're here.
Go read The Stranger, and and that's kind of my answer. It's like, I don't really know if there's a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
We're just kind of here, and we have to make our own meanings to things. Why do we like the things we do? I think is honestly a bigger question. Why are we interested in what we're interested in? Because why are we intelligent in certain things? Well, because we're interested in them. If that follows, then like why are we interested in certain things? And that I have no idea the answer to that question. And maybe behavioral scientists or psychologists or whatever, they do know. I don't know. And I think that's something that puzzles me, because like I don't like, I mean, maybe it's a byproduct of like what we're surrounded with. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. Like I've asked so many questions throughout my life, and now that you're asking me to pick one or two, I can't.
However many you have. But it's really hard to put when people are put on the spot. You know? But
yeah.
I'll have you back on at some point.
Oh, that's cool.
And at that point, I'll ask you. We'll just kind of just talk about your bigger questions, because I'm actually writing something that I'm just trying to put my thoughts onto actual paper, because you have all these ideas of things, but you don't actually formulate, like, until I ask you questions that they force you to put words to your thoughts, and then it changes your thoughts. So I'm more or less just kind of doing that for myself. And it's helping a lot.
Oh, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, and therapy, and how you think that therapy is a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's what good therapy is. It's just basically them kind of talking to you, but really more like you talking to them and figuring out basically just talking out your issues or your problems.
I totally agree. Let me present what I think therapy is and why it's bad, and I'm totally down to be convinced otherwise. So I'm going to use an analogy. You go to physical therapy to get the tools to heal your body physically. You go to a personal trainer for someone to motivate you and be with you when you work out. A lot of therapists that you go to just take your money to talk to them and progress for a while, but they don't leave you with tools like, hey, over this next week till I see you again, you should really think, in what ways did your parents affect you? In what way, why do you want to go into nuclear? Like they don't give you the same things that a physical therapist gives you in terms of tools to fix yourself. They're more like personal trainers, which is totally a valid thing. Some people do need just someone to talk to, like to vent with, or someone to work, like motivate them to work out. But I think that a good therapist should, when you come in, be like, hey, here's my problem. Their goal should be like, all right, let's get you the tools to fix yourself as quick as possible. But instead, I think that it tends to be more of, all right, let's keep doing this indefinitely, which is not necessarily the answer.
I think that this kind of goes back to the like pseudo conspiracy idea that everyone's just out to make a quick buck, and it's like most therapists have a wait list like months long. So I don't think that that's it at all. I think that maybe there are some that are like questionable in their activities, but I think that by and large, no. But therapists are doing an honorable profession, and they're doing their best to help you. I think that everyone has a different style and a different specialization. I think that every case has a different need. Some people do just need to be listened to. Some people need to be challenged. Some people need somewhere to sit for hours at a time or an hour a week until 2 months pass and they finally feel comfortable enough to talk. And it's up to that therapist to figure out what that person needs. And a good therapist will recognize what the patient needs and will change their treatment procedure to meet the needs of that person. And sometimes the therapist will give you, exercises to do at home. Other times the exercises kind of come naturally, and I think that's part of, what the therapist should recognize. The therapist will be good at recognizing this or that. Have you ever been to a therapist before?
I went once, just to kind of see what it was, and it was very similar to my experience going to physical. I obviously went to school to be a physical therapist, and as soon as I interned at an office, I'm like, this is the most horrendous business that takes advantage of sick and desperate people. And I'm decently outspoken. I think physical therapy for people who have gone through surgery and need rehabilitation, very helpful. I think therapy for people who have PTSD and need to work through it, maybe, very helpful. But I think a lot of people in the medical field, because when they go to school, they get this huge amount of debt, so they need to make their practice profitable. They're more incentivized to have returning patients than to heal people because they have a debt to repay. And so if your goal is to make more money, it's more like, what do you think of chiropractors? Do you think they're snake oils, or do you think they're legitimate?
Yes and no.
Okay. Well, factually, from my personal experience, they're pretty much snake oil salesmen, but they'll keep telling you to come back every couple days. I think that's what a therapist is.
I've had an experience with both in terms of chiropractors, and I think chiropractors do have to go to school for quite some time, and they learn a lot of what I would consider snake oil sort of things, but they learn a lot of legitimate things. I had an issue with my back for a very long time, and the chiropractor did a certain thing to me, and like a switch, it was fixed, and that was unbelievable. And most of the time, the chiropractor's work did not do anything to me, and so. In part, I agree with you, but I don't think that chiropractors just go in thinking like, I'm going to scam more people today.
No, I think everything wants to help.
Believe that they're doing good, and I think maybe you must have had just bad experiences, because I don't believe that people are just in it to, get people to come back. I feel like there's too many people on too many wait lists to actually benefit. I think there are certain cases.
I'm not saying they all just want you to come back. I'm saying they're underlyingly incentivized for you to come back. And unless they outspokenly say, hey, let's try to get this done in as few of sessions as possible.
Most of my experiences have been like that. There is one doctor that I've gone to that I get medication prescribed to me for an issue, and he makes me come back every single year to basically, and the medicine is totally benign. Like it's not going to have really any side effects or anything. And he's like, hi. I'm like, hi. He's like, how's that medication working for you? It's like, yeah, it's still Still doing his job?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I'll prescribe you another year. It's like, I just paid you $20 to have a 1 minute conversation.
But if you didn't have insurance, it would have been hundreds.
it would have been like $120 thing just for you to say yeah, this is still working just like it was last year and the year before.
I guess where I'm coming from is
So,
if you go to therapy, you're admitting that you have a problem and you want to fix that problem. And I think a lot of the mental things that therapy has is people are judging their own thoughts. They aren't just having the conversation with themselves. And they have to go to the therapist as a way to be like, another person is telling me it's okay to think the way that I do.
sometimes.
I mean, the majority of, if you go to therapy and it gets fixed, it tends to be you fix your own problems.
Sometimes.
They help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing would be we just need to teach people, there's no thought police. You can think anything. You can go down horrible. It's like when you're standing on a building, your brain quickly says, oh, what would I jump? It's like the call of the void. Every single person experiences that, and you go through that thought pattern to be like, oh, that's not a good solution. And I think some people start going down a path of thought that they need to reach the end of to fix their problem, but they judge themselves saying, oh, even if I just think about this, I'm a bad person. But then in the presence of a therapist, you can actually go down that whole route.
Yes. I think I see what you're saying.
People can be their own therapists in a way. And if they
In a
really
way.
get stuck, friends and family should be able to be a therapist.
Wow. I totally disagree. One, it's not the responsibility of your friends and family. Two, your friends and family might be approaching you the wrong way. So I've seen two. I've seen more than two, but I've seen two primarily for extended periods of time. And one of them, and I did a group session as well, several. And one of them was just totally not on the same wavelength. And I would explain, I'm having this issue, I'm having that issue. And she's like, oh, I'm angry for you that that would happen. And I'm angry for you that you're experiencing this and people aren't understanding you. I'm like, that is so not the case right now. A lot of this is my fault. I don't need your manufactured sympathy. Was not a good therapist for me. Might be good for other people, but for me, horribly useless.
So what has a good therapist done?
I went to one and she listened to everything that I would share and say, and she immediately identified that emotional BS was not going to work with me. Again, might work for someone else, and I shouldn't call it BS, but that would not work with me. And so she took a much more logical approach. Sometimes the logical approach worked, sometimes it didn't. But she knew that, she identified that would work a lot better. And there was an issue that I was having once where I was I'm having, she asked me, describe this situation, write a word essay for me and really think about what you were thinking in this situation, think about why you were thinking that way. And I was explaining it, and I was like, oh yeah, I was gonna do this one thing, or I didn't do this one thing. And she was like, well, why not? And I was like, well, this reason. And she's like, so what? And I was like, and I wanted to cry because it was I never followed it that far. I'd never gotten for years of dealing with the issues that I had been dealing with at that point. I had never asked, so what? And I mean, I had asked, so what? And it would just feed back into itself. But I never asked, so what? That made me stop. And it took us weeks and months to get to that point. And I will never forget that, because that was a slap in the face. And it was no one else, other people are invested in you getting better in the sense that they don't want to see you suffering. And so if someone was if I was telling my mom that, or my girlfriend that, or my friends that, and they would just be like, so what? It would be like, okay, you don't understand. Or like, okay, you just want to see me get better. You don't get where I'm coming from. Whereas when she was like, so what? She's like, I understand everything you're saying. I've been talking to you exclusively about these problems, more or less, for weeks. And I am in a position to ask you, so what? And maybe you won't have an answer. And if you don't have an answer, maybe you'll see that that's the whole root of the problem.
You don't think that your friends and stuff?
No.
Don't you think that's you just projecting like, oh, they just want me to get better? So
No.
But they're asking the exact same question.
But
Maybe
they don't have weeks and months in the back to get there. And they don't, the way that they're asking the question, the context that they're asking the question of like, oh, you have... I'm trying to think of a good, like, it would be a lot better if I actually could like describe the situation, but I don't really want to describe the situation
personal.
itself. So I'm trying to think of like a good analog of like, let's...
We have to come up with a hypothetical.
I guess. But basically, just like, I was refusing to do something that would be outright beneficial to me, and it was like no one could understand why I would be doing that thing. And she, regardless if she understood or not, she'd followed my train of logic all the way through, completely, not angry, not burdened,
not judging
at all. And it's like when you go and talk to your friend, I don't know if you've ever, like, I'm sure you've probably felt sad or depressed or whatever before, and people will be like, oh, you can talk to me about anything, and like you're hesitant to actually talk to them because you know that you're taking their time. And like,
at the end of the day, you could have followed that thought progression yourself, though. You could have just asked, like, did you learn, like, have you applied that to a different part of your life where you have another problem and you can just take it further without judging yourself and just be like, so what? And then you can take it one step further. For everything, like, hey, why am I angry when someone cuts me off in traffic? Like road rage, you should cut right there because I'm angry.
I don't know if that specific event has helped me with other things in terms of applying that same logic, but I know that I'm a much better, calmer person now than I was when I first got to Oregon 5 years ago. So maybe it did. I know that there was one instance where I was having a really hard time getting along with a boss of mine, and I was like, this is the way he is, and this is the way I am. And basically she was like, well, maybe it's just like you guys are communicating the same ideas in different ways. And that totally changed my relationship with that boss. Like, totally, overnight. It was like, wow, like when he's asking me, like, when he's telling me, like, we're going to do this, he's really asking me, do you think we should do this? He respects me as a worker and he wants my opinion, but his way of asking is telling. And he knows that if it's important enough, I'll push back. And this is a person who is used to not being pushed back against. So that was his way of asking. And I never realized it until, I had that other perspective. And I think it's really easy for someone to just brush off what their friends or family are saying. Your family and friends are sort of like almost like a vent almost, where it's like, what you're telling me isn't actually going to help me in the long term. And is that on you? Possibly. But like when you're in a mental health crisis or when you're having mental health issues, and even that, saying the words like mental health issues, like it carries such a stigma to it. Such a stigma. But like when you're having issues like that, it's hard to like take what someone is saying and like everything that my friend is going to tell me as like a comment I've thought of before. And a lot of people who go to therapy, it's like they'll resist for a long time because it's like, what's the therapist going to tell me that I don't already know? I used to be like that until I had this one therapist that totally changed everything for me. And it's like, I mean, why do you people who are terminally ill, a lot of times they'll go see a therapist and like a end of life counselor. And it's like, the end of life counselor isn't going to like make you not be dying. But that end of life counselor has dealt with people who are in your same situation. They haven't dealt with you, but they've dealt with many people, and they've gone to school and learned techniques why would you send someone to a teacher? Why don't you just teach your kid everything yourself? I could just learn out of a textbook how to teach my kid basic math and teach him basic math.
I think we are saying the same thing. I think therapists should be teachers, not like, I think that should be their primary thing, is teaching them how you're maybe misseeing information, and how for the rest of your life you can see things differently.
Well, yes, but
I think often they're not.
Well, I mean, if you're going to a physical therapist and they're teaching you how to walk again, you're not going to use that technique to walk on your hands. Mm-hmm. You're going to use that technique to use your feet to walk again. Yeah. And so when you go to a therapist for an issue with this or that, sometimes the techniques that they're teaching you are applicable to other things, but other times the techniques that they're teaching you, or the perception or perspective that they're giving you, is isolated to that issue. And you're going in there for a reason, and they're trying to treat that reason. Therapists are doctors. Psychiatrists are doctors. Doctors
have done a bunch of shitty things time and time again. Doctors prescribe Lipitor. Doctors condone cigarettes. Doctors are not trusted people in my eyes.
And doctors absolutely should be, because I have not met a doctor who goes into the field with bad intentions.
But I think that by nature of their education, they're just bought up in propaganda of a lot of what they learn is super valid. If you go to a holistic doctor, or someone whose immediate thing isn't, I've heard someone say, if you're going to go into surgery, you should speak to a surgeon, and that should be the very last thing they want to do, is give you surgery.
Yeah.
And I think that should be all doctors' cases.
I think most surgeons are like that.
Yeah.
But
I think surgeons get it.
Yeah, well, I think some surgeons are also I'm going to prescribe what I know, and I'm going to prescribe surgery because I know I can fix this problem. Mm-hmm. But why do you have the recording equipment that you do?
Because I made an album, or because
I know, but why this equipment? Why this specific equipment?
Oh, good point.
And it's it's the case for everything. It's you probably watched some videos and you saw some people using this equipment, or you maybe looked up reviews and you saw that it was good. But how is that any different from propaganda in and of itself? Doctors, they learn certain things work more often than they don't. But at the end of the day, a doctor is a human being.
That's
and so
they
are fallible to the same issues. And I think I have several friends who are in the medical field, and it actually causes me great pain to see people talk about doctors as if they aren't worth the shoes that they're standing in, because it's
I think they're trying their best.
I think
they're just people with a lot more knowledge.
I was gonna say with a lot more knowledge.
Tons more knowledge.
But I mean, it's people think they can go on WebMD and diagnose themselves, and sometimes that's actually kind of true. If you have a scrape, is probably just eczema, wipe some cream on it. But there are some cases where doctors are not going to solve the problem for you. That doctor might not have seen a certain thing. There's so many things that can go wrong with the human body. But
just
overall,
factually, the point that we're in an overprescription epidemic, or not that, but you know what I mean. Tons of I went to a doctor with a strep throat, and I got 10 double strength Vicodin, and I was just that's not okay. And then between that and just the fact that I think a lot of your healing capabilities don't come from external sources, and unless it's extreme cases such as you need surgery, or some people do need. I think doctors don't have the time, and they are so money oriented because they're in debt, that they have to pump through patients, and they have to be oriented they don't have the time for are you breathing properly? Are you getting enough sleep? They can't do all these things.
And I don't know how you can say that when there's so many people who are in their 50s and 60s and are certainly not in debt anymore, and they're still doctors and they're still doing this. Maybe it's oh, this is what I know, but I don't think that it stems from doctors at least when they don't have their own practice, I'm pretty sure doctors get a salary. Like and I can kind of see where you would get where you are, where it's like, okay, well, the doctors are taught in a certain way because like it's all part of the system, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm disinclined to believe that it's all like, everyone is in the drug company's pockets. I went to a doctor, and again, anecdotal evidence that I should not be relying on because I'm a scientist and anecdotal evidence is bollocks. But I went to a doctor, and it was okay for me to get prescribed.
10 minutes.
I was okay for me to get prescribed like Ritalin or Adderall, and she was super loath to do so. She did not want to do it. And I was like, I want to give it a try. And she's like, I don't want to do this, but like I will, but I really don't think it's right. And she was constantly pushing another thing on me instead that was not an amphetamine. It was something else. And it's like she was doing the exact opposite. She was not trying to push.
I am by no means saying all doctors.
Yeah, I know.
I'm never speaking in absolutes.
And I'm by
with
no
anything.
means saying all doctors. Not all doctors are in the right, but I think that it's not right to just like dismiss.
To write them all off. That's very valid.
To write off doctors, like the nebulous concept of a doctor as just like a pill dispensing machine who doesn't actually care about their patients.
I think they don't have the system that's set up doesn't allow them to care for their patients adequately. And so they're doing to the best of their capabilities to help people, is my understanding of the current situation. I think a patient, you'd pretty much need to talk to a doctor all day for them to get a full understanding. And if you're talking about some super small, like one of your serotonin receptors, like your 5-HTP2B is getting agonized too much and your heart valve's getting a little thing, they could completely just, they don't know that much. They haven't gone through every single thing. They don't have the time to. And so they could just give you a prescription that's a Band-Aid over it, like an SSRI instead of, they're like, oh, but you're only sleeping 3 hours a night because you have PTSD and are having nightmares or something.
I definitely see what you're saying, and I don't really see a solution to the problem. I've commented on this before, where it's like, we're always straining for more doctors, and yet our application and our requirements to get into med school are just like obscenely ridiculous. And like, I think that, if you got an A- once in like your AP or your Calc 3 class, that shouldn't bar you from going into med school. Like
that's a good point.
That seems ridiculous. And so like we're at a constant shortage of doctors. And I've asked one before, it's like, why don't we just like have more students get into med school? And apparently there's just not enough med schools. The med schools are cram-packed and it's expensive. And so these med students get into super debt to go to, as you said, they get into ridiculous amounts of debt to go and be a doctor. And I mean, like, doctor burnout is a huge thing. Like, they put the doctors through absolute hell. And I lived with a surgeon, and while he was doing his residency, he told me they had a rule that the resident could not work more. Was it a residency or an internship? I think it was an internship, actually. But he was like, you cannot work more than 4 80-hour weeks in a row. Can you imagine? Like, that's the rule. Like, you can't work more than 4 80-hour weeks in a row. Why? You should not even have a rule for that situation, because that situation should not exist ever. But this is what they go through.
Your surgeon's been chronically sleep deprived, which has been
Isn't
shown
terrifying?
to cause more cognitive decline than being drunk.
Yeah.
And then
Isn't
they're
that
gonna,
terrifying?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I don't have trust in. I don't have trust in the system. I think the individuals have the best intentions. The system is causing them to not be able to help.
I think it's an interesting point, and this is going to be something that I think about later. As a side note, there's something that I was thinking about on the way here, where I was like, a lot of people, when marijuana was becoming legal in certain states, a lot of people were like, oh, it shouldn't be legal because we can't test if people are on it while they're driving, the same way that we can like breathalyze someone with alcohol. And I was just like, you can't test someone for being tired either. Like, and holy cow, is driving exhausted, so much more dangerous.
So much more dangerous.
My dad, there have been many times where I've been, my dad, he drinks pretty much every night. He'll have like a beer or two. And sometimes I'll be talking to him. He gets up at like 6 a.m. every day, 5:30, 6 a.m., drives an hour down to Detroit, works like 10 hours, 12 hours, drives an hour back, comes home, eats dinner, cracks a beer or two. And it's like 8:30 or 9. And I'm talking to him and he's like loopy and, acting silly. And it's like, how many beers have you had? He's like, I've had one. And it's like, he's just exhausted. And it's so easy to mistake one for the other. I pulled an all-nighter. I pulled many all-nighters in undergrad, but I didn't drive. I was walking. And I was walking from my apartment to class to drop off the homework that I had pulled an all-nighter to do. And I remember a car drove by on the road, and I like watched the car drive by, and then a second later, like a full second passed before I processed like car on road.
There. Yeah.
Like it was very, very strange because it was like I was absorbing the information visually, but I wasn't interpreting the information like at all. And so, like, there was a huge lag in that, I don't know, mental, blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
We're out of time.
All right.
But I'm going to have you back, and we're going to continue all this.
It sounds
I'm gonna
great.
Ask your questions why.
I love being here.
All right. If you have a pitch, you want people to see your work or anything?
I will say real quick, we've talked a lot about nuclear and stuff. And you've asked about nuclear energy and this and that. And my biggest thing about pitching nuclear in general is that nuclear is not just energy, and it's not just weapons, it's not just meltdowns and so on. I work with radiation detectors, and we didn't talk like at all about this, and most people don't even realize that radiation detectors is a thing. Like, I'm a nuclear engineer. Whoa, you work with bombs and no, I work with radiation detectors. Oh, what's that? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people don't even like ask what's that, because it's just like, that seems really weird. It's a totally huge field out there, and it's not just bombs and reactors. And I wish that more people knew, it would be like judging mechanical engineers for only building tires for cars. It's like, there's so much more.
Yeah.
So not just weapons, not just reactors. There's a lot out there in my field that I would love to share with people, and I wish that they would be interested in. And we do good work. So, yeah.
All right, I like that. Like, subscribe, share, go do whatever with your life. Take care, everyone. you.